The council chamber hummed like a hive of metallic insects, each delegate clicking their mandibles, wings, or whatever else they used to express disappointment. I stood there, hands awkwardly clasped behind my back, trying to look heroic instead of like someone who had slept through the shuttle ride and smacked his head on the airlock frame. Velina was next to me, tall, armored, sharp-eyed, her long ears angled in the universal posture of "Why am I here with this creature?" I gave her a polite smile. She did not return it. Her ears tilted further back as if offended by my friendliness. The council questioned my combat certifications 3 times. They scanned my bones twice. They even asked if humans were always this soft and floppy. One insectoid minister poked my shoulder experimentally and declared, "Yes, floppy." I resisted the urge to explain that humans did, in fact, come with bones. Some of us were just hiding them under reasonable amounts of skin. When the session finally ended, they assigned Velina to me with the same enthusiasm one might use to assign someone a broken fusion torch. Our shuttle departed the station, its engines rumbling like an elderly star whale. Velina took the pilot's seat, fingers dancing across controls, ears twitching in disapproval every time I moved. She caught me looking at them, her long, graceful ears that arched like living antennae, and snapped, "Do not stare." I apologized immediately, but she kept glancing at me suspiciously, as though waiting for me to fall apart before her eyes. I sat very still to avoid giving her proof. We entered patrol space an hour later. The region was quiet, dotted with derelict hulls drifting in slow spirals, victims of old border skirmishes. Velina kept her eyes forward. I kept mine on the sensor display. I noticed a flicker in the readings. "We should veer 30 degrees starboard," I said. She didn't respond. I tried again. "There's an ambush pod hiding behind that wreckage." She turned just enough to give me the look people reserve for malfunctioning robots. The ship jolted as plasma fire streaked past the canopy. She whipped the shuttle around with a hiss. "How did you see that?" I shrugged. "Lucky guess. Humans do not guess like that." "We do when very motivated," I said as another blast narrowly missed us. She dove into a roll. I fired the countermeasures, and the ambush pod detonated in a blossom of blue fire. She landed us on a nearby maintenance platform, ears high with irritation. "Explain," she demanded. I told her the truth. I didn't know. Humans just had moments, strange instincts, flashes of clarity that appeared when the universe decided to throw something unpleasant at us. She did not like my answer, but she couldn't argue with the results. She stalked off to inspect the hull for damage, muttering that she should have requested a transfer. We resumed patrol. Hours passed in uneasy silence until we reached the nebula's edge. The sensors whispered again, faint vibrations like something stretching after a long sleep. Velina stiffened. "This region should be dormant." "Should," I echoed, because the reading didn't match dormant at all. It matched something extremely old is waking up and probably hungry. She recalibrated the scanners 3 times. When the same result appeared, she glanced at me with reluctant acknowledgement. "You sensed it before the instruments." "I'd prefer not to," I admitted. "It usually means something unpleasant is coming." Her ears angled forward sharply as a low rumble spread through the nebula. The sound was wrong, too deep, too conscious. Velina brought weapons online. "Prepare yourself," she ordered, still sounding unconvinced that I would survive anything larger than a stern breeze. I tightened the straps of my lightweight armor, which, admittedly, did not look particularly heroic. "If anything tries to kill us, I'll do my best not to die immediately." She almost choked. Is that meant to reassure me? "Mostly myself." The nebula flashed, a pulse like a slow heartbeat. Velina's breath hitched. Mine did too, though for slightly different reasons. Hers was fear, mine was the growing certainty that this pulse was only the first. Whatever ancient presence lay within the swirling gases had noticed us. The council's laughter, their disbelief in the old legends, they all seemed very far away now. Velina gripped the controls. "Human, Do not do anything reckless." I nodded, though my mind was already racing, instinct tugging at threads I didn't fully understand. The nebula pulsed again, louder, closer, aware. Velina's ears folded back in alarm. I felt it too, an awakening, a consciousness older than the maps that charted this region. "Velina," I said softly, "we need to leave, now." She didn't question me this time. And as the shuttle accelerated into the dark, the nebula released a sound that felt disturbingly like laughter. Velina didn't speak for a long while after we escaped the nebula. Her ears stayed tilted back, the posture that meant she was thinking very hard or considering throwing me out of the nearest airlock. The silence stretched until it felt heavier than artificial gravity. Finally she said, "Humans should not sense things before instruments. That is not normal." I tried to give a reassuring shrug, but the harness held me too tightly, so it looked more like an awkward shoulder wiggle. She stared at the movement as if it confirmed every suspicion she had about my species. We reached a way station drifting alone in the void, its lights flickering like a tired logbook keeper who hadn't slept in a decade. Velina docked with crisp precision. I stepped out, only to immediately smack my helmet on the hatch rim. The clang echoed down the corridor. A passing technician looked at me with alarm. Velina sighed so loudly her ears drooped. "How does your species survive?" she muttered. "Mostly by accident," I said. The station's commander greeted us, though by greeted, I mean he squinted at me and whispered to Velina, "This is the human the council sent." "Does it break easily?" I pretended not to hear, but Velina's ears twitched in irritation, which I took as a small victory. She explained the nebula disturbance. The commander laughed nervously and dismissed it as scanner echo. Then the lights flickered again. Then the floor rumbled. Then everyone stopped laughing. The sensors burst online with a stream of warnings. Something massive had appeared just beyond the station perimeter. Velina sprinted to the operations deck, her steps light and sure. I followed, tripping once on a cable someone definitely left out on purpose. We reached the view window just in time to see a void beast rise from the dark, its many limbs unfolding like a nightmare stretching after a nap. The station crew screamed. Velina reached for her weapon. I waved politely at the creature before realizing that perhaps politeness was not the appropriate response. The void beast slammed a limb against the station. Bulkheads groaned. Alarms wailed. Velina yelled for me to get behind her, which I considered briefly before noticing the creature preparing to strike the fuel tanks. "That seems bad," I said, and darted to the console. My fingers flew across controls I shouldn't have been able to navigate, rerouting power and activating the emergency turret array. Velina blinked at me as the turrets roared to life and blasted a volley into the beast's sensory cluster. "How did you know its weak point?" she shouted. "It looked sensitive," I said, because explaining instinct was getting repetitive. The creature reeled back, screeching. The deck heaved. I grabbed onto the console while Velina braced like a pillar of armored stone. The station commander panicked and ordered evacuation. The crew scrambled. Velina pulled me toward the exit, but I hesitated. The void beast had latched onto the reactor housing. If it ruptured, the entire sector would glow for centuries. "We have to dislodge it," I said. Velina stared at me as if weighing whether I was suicidally brave or suicidally stupid. "How?" she demanded. A half-formed plan sparkled in my mind like a dangerously unstable star. "We lure it away." Velina didn't like that. Her ears flattened in a very clear absolutely not. But then the station creaked again, and she muttered a phrase in her language that I suspected was extremely rude. "Fine, but if you die, I will be very angry." "I'll do my best to avoid that," I said. We sprinted back to our shuttle. I initiated a high-frequency pulse that mimicked the creature's prey signature. The void beast reacted instantly, tearing itself free and gliding toward us like a mountain taking flight. Velina throttled the engines, weaving through debris fields. The beast followed, smashing asteroids in its path. "This is madness," she shouted. "Agreed," I replied, clinging to my seat as we dove into a dense cloud of shattered hulls. The creature wedged itself among the wrecks, momentarily confused. Velina seized the opening and launched a barrage of torpedoes that destabilized the debris cluster. Gravity's shear rippled, dragging the void beast into the collapsing field. It shrieked before the distortion crushed it into iridescent dust. Velina slumped back in her seat, panting. I, on the other hand, was trying not to throw up from the rapid maneuvering. The station hailed us, thanking us profusely while also expressing polite confusion about how a human managed to outmaneuver a creature that had destroyed entire battle groups. Velina said nothing, but her eyes kept sliding toward me, troubled. "You fight like someone who has done this before," she said quietly once communications ended. "Not like someone who has barely passed council training." "I really haven't done this before," I said. "I prefer quiet hobbies, reading, not being eaten." She didn't laugh, but her ears angled in a way that suggested she wanted to, just a little. We set course deeper into Dominion space, hoping to warn the Council. But as our ship coasted through the star lanes, a whisper echoed across the comm channels. A pulse, rhythmic, ancient, identical to the one we felt in the nebula. Velina's ears stood erect in alarm. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. The ancient thing was awake now, and it was spreading. The council chamber was a battlefield of denial when we arrived. Delegates shouted, scrambled, tried to blame each other for the sector-wide disturbances, and a few even accused Velina and me of tampering with cosmic energies for attention, which felt rude because I hadn't tampered with anything on purpose. Velina slammed her gauntlet onto the table, ears angled so sharply forward that the entire room flinched. She explained the void beast, the collapsing debris field, the ancient pulse spreading across the star charts. They ignored her until the lights flickered and the station trembled. It was almost satisfying, though the situation itself was not. The pulse sounded again, this time audible without scanners, a deep resonance that settled into my bones like a memory I had never lived. Delegates panicked, scattering for escape pods. One tripped over his own tail and blamed gravity. Another declared he was retiring immediately, effective 10 seconds ago. Velina grabbed my arm. "We must reach the defense grid," she said. "We are the only ones who have seen what this thing does." We sprinted back to our shuttle. Outside, stars warped as something vast moved through subspace, bending light around itself like an enormous invisible hand brushing aside constellations. Velina took the controls while I scanned the disturbance. The readings didn't make sense, energy patterns twisting into impossible geometries, like ancient architecture building itself out of nothing. "That's not a creature," I said. "It's an intelligence." Velina's ears folded back. "Can it be fought? Probably not with polite conversation." "Good, you are terrible at polite conversation." I decided not to argue. The intelligence emerged fully. Not a body, but a structure of shimmering filaments stretching across the void. A lattice of thought so old it felt like gravity had learned philosophy. It extended a tendril of energy toward the nearest defense satellite. The satellite vanished, not destroyed, simply erased as if the universe had forgotten it existed. Velina inhaled sharply. "We cannot let it reach inhabited systems." Instinct surged through me again, clearer than ever. The lattice pulsed in patterns, not random but communicative, like the rhythm of a foreign language I somehow recognized without understanding. A strategy unfolded in my mind, dangerous, desperate, absurd enough that even Velina might call it reckless. "We need to lure it into the gravity well," I said, "the one near the collapsed star field." Velina blinked. "The well that disintegrates entire fleets." "Yes. And how do you propose we survive that?" Optimistically. She groaned into her hands. "Why did the council give me a human?" She followed the plan anyway. We flew straight toward the lattice, engines screaming as the filaments reacted. Energy swept toward us, erasing space in its path. Velina dodged with impossible precision, weaving between collapsing pockets of reality. I activated every pulse signal the shuttle had, broadcasting a pattern that mimicked the intelligence's own resonance. It turned toward us, curious. Or hungry, or both. Velina glanced at me. If we die, I want you to know your jokes were sometimes acceptable. That is the highest praise I've ever received, I said. The gravity well loomed ahead, a swirling pit of fractured space-time. The intelligence followed, sweeping closer. Filaments reached for us. Velina pushed the engines to maximum, our shuttle shaking apart one bolt at a time. Just before the filaments touched us, I triggered the final pulse, a sharp, discordant burst that disrupted the lattice's rhythm. The intelligence recoiled, struggling to stabilize. Velina pulled us up in a violent arc. The lattice, unable to correct course in time, drifted into the gravity well. Light bent. Filaments stretched and snapped. The ancient intelligence let out a sound that was not a scream but felt like one. Then it collapsed inward, dissolving into a spiral of fading brilliance that vanished into the singularity. Silence returned to the stars. Velina slumped over the controls, breathing hard. I checked the hull. Against all logic, we were intact. Barely. We survived, I said. Mostly by accident, she muttered, but her ears softened in relief. When we returned to the council, they stared at us like two ghosts who had wandered into the wrong meeting. Velina presented the data. I stood beside her, surprisingly steady. The council didn't laugh this time. No one poked my shoulder. When the session ended, Velina walked with me to the observation deck. The stars outside were calm again, untouched by the threat that had nearly consumed them. She turned to me, ears angled in thoughtful respect. "You have changed," she said. "You are still strange, still clumsy, but you are also something else, something I do not yet have a word for. Human." I offered. She shook her head. "No, more than that." I wasn't sure I agreed, but I had faced an ancient intelligence and survived, joked through terror, and saved a galaxy that never expected anything from me. Maybe that was enough. Velina let her shoulder rest lightly against mine, a gesture of trust in her culture. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "we face it together." I nodded, watching the quiet stars, no longer something distant and untouchable, but something I had helped protect. And for the first time, the universe felt just a little less overwhelming.